live? Hey guys, Steve Moran here. I'm with Kelly Papa. I'm so excited about this. This is going to be fantastic. But before we get started, let me run our little intro. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. Well, first off, Kelly, the congratulations are in order. You were the, what do they describe it, the interim CEO?
I was acting CEO.
Acting CEO, yeah. Of Duncaster. Help me out with the rest of it.
Just retirement community. We're a life planning community in Connecticut. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And as of November 1st, you first officially became the real deal, right?
The real deal, yeah.
That is
no more acting, I say.
Yeah. So let's start by talk to me a little bit about your community, what levels of care, or what type of community, and that kind of thing.
Sure. So we have 192 independent living apartments. And so in those apartments, some are couples, some are singles. And so that's about 200 plus residents we serve independently. Then we have 2 assisted livings, one for more of a social model. So there's 18 people that live there. And then also a memory care assisted living that we call Dogwood. It's gorgeous. It's pretty much brand new. And that there's 24 people that live there. And then we have a small skilled nursing, our healthcare center, Caleb Hitchcock Healthcare Center, right here on campus. I can see it through a window right here. And there we care for 60 people, all private bedrooms and kind of the neighborhood small house model.
Terrific. So I want to sort of give a little bit of a backstory for our audience about how this conversation came about. You and I have a mutual close friend, Denise Brudeau Scott, and I was talking to Denise 6 or 8 weeks ago, and she was recounting a conversation she had with you, saying that unlike the rest of senior living, you were sort of embarrassed because you're not really struggling with keeping and finding staff. So I don't know whether I got that exactly right, but that's how I heard the story. And that got me to reach out to you and say, okay, I got to hear about this. So I came away. I've been doing conferences every week for the last 5 weeks. I have not taught. Actually, that's not true. I talked to one other community that's not struggling too much for staff, but with one exception, everybody else is just struggling to both find staff and retain staff. And so I want to know what you're doing different.
What I'm doing different. That was a cool title you put up there, Steve. I think, I believe that when I believe the story started long ago, if that makes sense. And so now it started so long ago. And so I think if some of my employees heard me saying we weren't struggling with a staffing situation right now, they'd say, oh, of course we are, right? But in the scheme of things, where we could be and where our partners are and others who are struggling are, that could be us in a minute, right? And so we are all very much acknowledging that. But when I then take a lens to say, okay, what got us there, right? How do we unpack everything that has occurred? It isn't by accident at all, and so you look at things like our total compensation package that our managers in HR have always taught to that. And so people, residents, I almost said staff, have conversations to understand what is total compensation, right? We use things like pay active so that way if people want to get in there earlier and get their paycheck sooner and get some portion of their paycheck sooner, they can. So all of those different pieces that make total compensation and all of the other benefits that you're getting, we control costs for the staff on insurance. We are our own insurance provider for healthcare. And so all of these different things, instead of being at the mercy of an insurance company that wants to hike your fees up 20% and change their whole model, we then take ownership of that and help our staff know where to get the best care always. Within that, I would also share one of the other prong would be our reputation. And so having really high standards, having high expectations, and having people who are willing to get there. Those the reputation of high standards, and kindness. I mean, we have fun, so that kind of all comes together in this place of our culture, right? Our reputations, our culture. And so this morning, as I was, or all week long, really, I'll say, Steve, it just didn't start this morning, but as I was thinking about, this could be like a whole research report, if you will, to really look at all these different factors. But I narrowed it down to what I'm calling the 4 C's. And so I have culture, compensation, communication, and compassion. And so within all of those things, making sure under culture, the high standards, and it just goes higher and higher and higher. We have some of the highest staffing ratios in skilled nursing in the state. We do, actually. And so even when we feel like we're missing somebody, it's still higher than anywhere else. And so when you think about taking care of the staff members' well-being, just the number of people that they have to physically care for, versus I actually get time to sit with a resident and talk because the staffing ratios are such. And when you look at when I've been on listening tour now all year, preparing for this role and still will remain on it, I asked 3 questions to staff. What works for you at Duncaster? What do you wish for at Duncaster? And you wake up 2 years from now and you're really excited about what's happening at Duncaster. What is it? And so I've been looking for patterns and what are the gaps? What are the needs? And every single time I ask a staff member, they say it's the residents, 100%. And so if that's their motivator, we need to make sure that intrinsically in their work, they get time to do that. And so if it's building relationships with staff that keeps me motivated, with residents that keeps me motivated and to stay here, then that better be part of your day every day, right? So within that culture, those high standards, I like to say I'm tender but tough. I like to smile. You know me, Steve. I like to smile and have a good time and ask big questions and laugh and dance, especially during the pandemic. Any part of our time that we could just dance and be silly was important. But we're tough on standards. The policies and the procedures, when we deviate from them, we have a problem, and so we want to make sure that we are, my computer wants to do a patch update notification.
I hope you don't do that right now.
I don't know how to turn it off. I'll figure that out. But I think and you know what, that example, right? We got this. Like, we can figure it out. It's nobody's fault that it just went off, right? So way in which I
want to call timeout. There we go for just 1 second. So one of the things that I normally talk to people about is what to do if I disappear, because I have had I've had twice where in one case I had an internet failure, and the other time I had a power failure and I disappeared. No, I didn't give you a chance to get that. But it sounds like maybe I might have the same thing, and so I'll have to go all by myself if you disappear. But I can probably handle that. I'll just keep talking. They always got things to say, so we'll do the best we can, and hopefully it doesn't happen.
Hopefully it doesn't happen. I think I just wanted to talk for a second more about the 4 C's, if you don't mind, because it's really where I think I'm drawing from the framework. During COVID, we used a framework that was actually called the 4 C's too. And so, but it was the thing at night that you went home every night going, all right, did I do everything I was supposed to, right? And so when I think about culture, that's our values, that's our reputation. So in what ways are we pointing out when staff are doing actions that relate back to our values, right? So for that, we have our Bravo system, so we've got this Bravo system, you probably have heard of it, where they can go in and get points and go shopping, and it's like a internal Facebook, if you will, where people can see where each other is, and the staff can thank one another and give them points to go buy, something that they want. I got a bunt pan once. It was great.
Okay. So I want to stop you for a second. So this question comes up, and I think this is really an important question to ask. And I become friendly with James Rhee, who did one of the keynotes at Argentum. We had him on last week, and he and I are actually working on something really, really cool for next year that actually you need to talk about it publicly. So I'm going to publicly in a few weeks. But the idea, he talks a lot about spending time just listening to people.
Yeah.
And so this question is really great. Do you do it one-on-one or in group meetings?
I do it one-on-one. Yeah, but I only, I have done it in groups before, but it's the same 3 questions. And then coming from kind of the what do you call it? The inquiry processing, right? You know what I mean? So you're always in a period of inquiry. And then the last question is the miracle question from the book Switch, How to Make Change When Change is Hard by the Heath brothers. And it's that everything happened, so what symbolically are you most hopeful and what's evidence that it happened? So those would be how those would be how I would do that. So
okay, so let's go back to the four C's.
Sorry, I'm just making sure IT can turn off that patch thing. Back to that idea of do you do it individually or do it with everyone? I actually do it with all stakeholders too. And so there's times where I'm doing it with residents, I'm doing it with board members, but then they can see themselves in the future. So now I'm drawing from their stories and using their quotes and pulling them into the vision of the future. So yes. So culture number one. I've worked in places that you tout culture, but or I've been there and you're like, oh, I'm not living that. So you want to make sure that every employee is having the same lived experience of that culture.
So you're talking one of the things. So can you actually just run through the 3 questions again?
Oh yeah. What works for you at Duncaster? And if somebody looks at me like, huh? I go, yeah. What is it that's working? What is it that how you describe it? Question number 2 would be, what do you wish for? What do you wish? And that can go, I wish we had more spinach at dinner, to I wish I had a pickleball court, or I wish we had more diversity among our residents. And so we can get really big, we can get small. I always take notes too as I'm listening, because I want that person that I'm listening to know that they're being heard. And also because I can't remember anything anymore. So post-COVID.
And then what's the third question? What's the third question? And then I want to circle back a little bit on this question. I want to
the third question is the miracle question. And so I figure out what the date is and I say, all right, you wake up and it is November 5th, 2023. And you're really excited about what you're going to go do at Duncaster that day. What is it that you're doing? And, the answer.
Uh-oh. I am a little afraid we may have a patch coming through for Kelly. Kelly, if you can hear me, you might also try using the link to get back on via your phone, which is not ideal, but will work. So I'm going to keep talking for a few minutes and hopefully she will come back. I've been thinking a lot about leadership and what really makes great leadership. And I've come to the conclusion there are actually 3 things. And I'm working on a keynote on this. We will be writing about it. But I think the first thing it comes down to is what your vision is for your organization, your mission for your organization. Most organizations have a mission and they put it out there, but there's a lot of skepticism because what I find is that mostly organizations are not actually living out that mission. They say one thing, and then what ends up happening is they go, yeah, that's our mission, but we can't afford it, or it's too hard, or people won't do. So it's first off, really thinking through your mission. So at Senior Living Foresight, our mission is to help leaders lead better because we know that makes senior living better. And so everything is focused on that. We talk about it. I communicate it to my team. I say, thank you for making a difference in the industry. We tell stories about how we hear from readers and how we're making a difference in their organization. Sometimes we hear from people saying, we think that what you're talking about is terrible. And we talk about that too. And we learn from that. The second thing the second part of that mission thing is to really think in terms of how do I communicate that mission to my team? And we're back. So let me give you my last 2 things I want to say. The third thing is, and I'm going to actually ask Kelly about some of this stuff, but the third part of this sort of is that great leaders think about their customers, which in this case is the residents and the team and their residents' families, very differently than not great leaders. And then the third part of that is they think about their teams very differently. And so I wanted to actually dig into this. So Kelly, I'm going to ask you, I have a really important question to ask you. So it's November 5, 2023.
Yes.
What do you want to be doing at Duncaster?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I've heard it before.
Yeah, I think you probably have. And I'm curious if anybody's ever asked you that question.
I tend to be the one asking the questions.
I know. That's why I think it's fair to turn the table.
So 2 years. I want to be, I hope we are expanding our mission, and ensuring that the most highest quality possible lived experience for our residents and staff is occurring. I think we'll constantly be pushing the envelope for technology, and making sure that any system that we can make less complicated through any automation, get rid of the paper. Like, I'm a nurse, right? So back in the day, you wanted something done, you taped it to the nurse's station, right? I'm a nursing home nurse. That's my background. The paper, like it's not working. You know what I mean? It's not working. Follow what people are doing and add to it, right? Like, jump in that river of technology that's fast moving and keep going with this. So that, and this came out during COVID so much. And I know, my heart knows how deeply we worked to care for our staff during COVID. Anything they needed, any phone call in the middle of the night, any concerns, any worries, we were ever present for them. And any mask I could scrounge from any neighbor who could make them for me, we were doing. Everybody was employed. Nobody was working from home. They all pivoted. But we got through that together, but we're all weary now, And so in the next 2 years, a deep emphasis on wellness. And then if I zoom back even more, and I had been setting the stage prior to the Leading Age Conference, but continue this deep work, real learning and unlearning on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what that actually means, and how do you get it in the fabric of everything that your community is, and not backing down from that at all. Like, that is a huge priority. Of course, we want to be financially viable and continue our value proposition and all those other things. But if I think about 2 years, the lived experience, it is very much that sense of belonging, that every employee feels a sense of belonging. And one point that you just made, we did a little study thing, if you will, where we did have some. Sorry, I just got distracted.
I'm just sort of trying to pop up these comments where I think they're relevant so people can see them.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That's a good one. So we had in our dining room, we did have, obviously we closed for independent living. Obviously we got closed during COVID and all that. So as we're reopening in this grand reset of where people are working, we had a hard time getting dining servers. And so I think the turnover was okay. I think now you get to start fresh, and the leader of that department is excited about ensuring culture now, as she's growing as a leader. But also, we did like this little test. So the people who we hired, 16 new dining servers, 8 stayed, 8 left. What do you think was the common thread between the 8 who stayed? What do you think was the difference between these two groups?
I'm guessing that. I don't know. I mean, I'm guessing.
It's amazing.
Probably, what's that?
It never occurred to me, right? Our field is so unknown by people. They don't know what they're stepping into. The 8 who left, all applied in Career Builder, all went through the process. Actually, I'm going to rephrase that. The 8 that stayed were all referred by other staff members.
Wow.
The 8 that left, just filling out job applications and not really knowing what is this and how different we are. And do we then brush up against ideas of saying, do we do tipping? Do we change something up on the weekends and make it more bonus? Like, we are always working towards a livable wage, not just minimum wage, livable wage. There's like a 3-year plan to get there. But that for me was huge. Like, people in our field need to promote this field even more.
Well, so one of the things that I believe is that that there's a lot of talk in the industry about fixing the staffing problem. The industry can't fix it, but you as an individual operator can fix it. So if you look at the world of fast food, everybody is struggling for staff, except that that's not right. There are two fast food organizations. I'm not saying it's perfect for them, but they don't struggle nearly as much as anybody else. And that's In-N-Out Burger and Chick-fil-A. And the reason is, maybe it's because they pay a little bit more, maybe it's a little bit more, but mostly it's the working experience that they create, right? So I would love to see a few senior living organizations say, we're going to be in our marketplace, we're going to be the Chick-fil-A, the In-N-Out Burger of employers. It means that you guys who don't do this, tough luck, you're going to have an even harder time, because we're going to suck up your people. And if you want to not have that happen, you go be like us, right? Yeah. And it sounds like that's what you're doing.
Well, what do they say? The learner. My mother always says, the learners will inherit the world, while the learned will be extinct. And so it's constantly fun. And within that, so for In-N-Out Burgers, Chick-fil-A, I imagine they teach towards their values. They have a very clear mission. It's on the wall. And if if people aren't held accountable to that, the customer won't get the experience that the company wants them to get, right? So how do we name that and then measure it within our field? So, and I mean, the work's being done. We can do this work. But the lived experience for the staff then gets into our second two C's, which was, so the first two were culture and compensation. Second two is communication and compassion. Now I just bundled these into 4 buckets. There's no science behind this. It's just my own, kind of reflections. But when I think about communication, do we have apps, right? Now we have the Touchtown staff app, so that way staff can immediately call me if they want to, right, from their cell phones, so they're right in the app. We have just to make sure that it's always two-way, are we standing at a podium and professing something, or are we actually in dialogue to make it better? That true servant leadership. And then compassion, recognizing that everyone is going through something, and so the more I'm able to say that in small groups, I made a decision, whether it's going to kick me in the butt or not, I don't know. But my decision after being announced as acting CEO and now CEO, president and CEO, I decided I was going to put in a format for the entire year about meetings with staff, so they all knew when they were coming. But I chose not to do the large town hall forums because I wanted people to have space and voice. And so my office is set up in a way where there's a table with 4 or 5 chairs around it. There's a couch and a couple comfy chairs in the corner. There's one chair over here behind me if someone just wants to pop in. And so there's always a way, except for this moment, that door is open. Now, I need to make my calendar then also find time for the strategic work, right? And so this ability to make sure that communication is two-way. If I'm cutting people off when they come to visit me, the time I do need to cut them off when they come to visit me, they're going to know it's important, right? But if I all the time am too busy for people, the one time I'm actually running to get to my office to pop onto this link, I'm like, I can't talk right now. They're like, it's totally okay. But if my behavior, you know what I mean? So that communication, and then the compassion, like I said earlier, tender but tough. That book, Touch Points, I think that comes out of Touch Points, that resonated with me, that, we can be tender with people as long as we're all holding up the standards, and we can be educators to get them there. But we also need to know when to cut our ties and things that are not acceptable.
I think this is always and so much of that is really an art, right? Because, you have to have these standards, and there are clearly some standards where if somebody violates it, there's no second bite. But there are times where you have to have a hard standard where you go, well, yeah, that's my rule. But in this case, because that's compassion. And I mean, I think that the one thing I've learned is that, I used to, when I was younger, and more so even in high school, but even as a young adult, I'd see all these people who have much more perfect lives than me. But one of the things I've discovered is, as I've gotten to know all these perfect people, the only reason they're perfect is because I don't know them very well, because every single person I know, and I know some incredibly successful people, people who are successful in reputation, people who are billionaires, and you know what? They all got stuff in their life.
Stuff.
Right?
All got stuff.
Yeah, and so we've got, and it's impossible for us to walk in their shoes. So I've got a couple of things I want to touch bases with on what you've talked about so far. The first is this. So you're a not-for-profit. It's easy for you to do this because you got lots of money that the for-profit people don't have. So you just pay more money and you're good to go, right? Because I'm worried that people are going to see that.
Money. No, we're extremely frugal. And we do have residents that have accumulated wealth based on their life story, and the things. I mean, our residents, you hear these stories. These people changed the world, and that we live in, literally, and it's amazing. But yes, they hold us to a very tight margin because it all at the end of the day impacts their monthly fees. And so you can't just keep increasing. What we do have is a lot of generosity, and I'll go back to the generosity of the residents in the idea of compassion and culture. In that, especially during COVID, they took up a fund they did a heroes fund, and every staff member, it was based on hours, but a 40-hour staff member got a check for like $700 from the residents. Wow. I know. So I've got about 300 staff members. Of course, it was edited based on hours worked, but they've always done a gratitude. That's built right in the DNA of the story and why we come together. So that is a bit different. I would share that also what makes us different as not-for-profit is our, and what makes the work so exciting is those elements of those disciplines of a learning organization. And so when people are in learning mode, they are happier, they're more engaged, they're enthusiastic, they are thinking about the future oriented. And so we've got a huge emphasis on people, career patterns, what do you call them?
Career paths.
Yeah. So if people really pushing people to go back to school. So all of our partnerships with colleges and things like that to make sure that they can get discounts if they're a Duncaster employee, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess that would make us stand out. And then, being a not-for-profit, we can apply for grants. We just got a nice grant from Workmen's Compensation for some education that people loved, through Live Well. So
the other thing I want to talk for a minute about is, and I've been with leaders where I've seen this happen. So, and it was very painful to watch. I love listening tours. But I'm fearful that too often leaders go on listening tours and they may write it down, but nothing happens. So I guess what I'm wondering, and I assume for you, as is true with most leaders, that sometimes there are requests that maybe even reasonable requests that for one reason or another you can't do. So my question is how do you make sure that people feel heard, believing that the best way to make people heard is by action rather than by just writing it down?
So for me, I always follow up. So in those reasons or instances when I don't, I know at least I tried, and that's my track record. So this is my binders. I have a series of binders, just regular, spiral notebooks from 5-star.
Yep.
And every Sunday night I go through, I put a little box next to the things I need to do or follow up on. And every Sunday night I consolidate all that into just the one page. And so, and honestly, Steve, even sometimes I say to people, I don't have anything for that yet, but I got you, I'm going to carry that for you. Can I relieve that from you? And honestly, I would say that doing that over and over and over again, especially in a climate of a pandemic, I mean, that was an intentional practice, that I've just practiced. So, if I think about, now I'm trying to get back to your question, but if I think about how do you make sure that people feel heard, I think or that, probably not make a promise that you can't fulfill either. I think a lot of times I might say, all right, to be continued. I'm not sure where that fits in, but let me see where that fits in. I am very close to the staff here and the residents. I mean, really, really close. And it was a joy. Sorry, now this is personal. Well, I guess it all is personal.
It's all personal. It is all personal. It's all personal.
I wish you could see my office on the other side because the joy they expressed when the announcement came through from the board chair that I was going to be their president and CEO. No. I didn't realize, I was using change management theories, don't get me wrong, or practices, I should say. I didn't realize the level of angst that people were holding on to, not knowing who their leader was going to be. And to see the outpour of trust, words like trust, and we're so happy and the future's bright, come from this community. They know I value the same things they value. And because I don't profess, that's a dumb word. I speak to my values. I read my journal entries in front. At President's Chat, we have twice a month, I and the team talk to all the residents in the meeting room. And I read my journal entry from the other night, which was, it started off, what keeps me up at night. This is what keeps me up at night. And they asked for copies of it, and so I want people to feel safe and open and welcome in my presence. And I want them to always bring out their best. And so I don't know, that's just who I am.
I love this. So one of the things that, as I interact with readers, followers, and I get a chance to meet people in person, one of the things I hear from people a lot that makes me feel so grateful and also sort of puzzles me is that they go, "You're just like you are when you write or when you're on video. You're not any different." And I'm really proud of that, because I'm out there and I don't have all the answers. I hear that in you, it's like, you're the real you. You're not putting on a show because you're the CEO. It's just, you're laying your heart out there. And I think when you lead with your heart like that,
oh yeah,
people love following you. And so I'm gonna. This is actually a great question. I don't know, we're really out of time, but I want to actually at least sort of toss this out there. Maybe it's even a discussion starter. So what do you think about providers reluctant to pay a living wage for their zip code? Seems to me the cost of not paying a living wage and remaining understaffed is much higher. So I want to be a little careful. I want to set the stage on this. I'm not going to pick on any provider, because every provider has stuff that they're dealing with, right?
Absolutely.
And one of the things I would tell people, though, and I actually didn't know this until I was at Leading Age a couple of weeks ago, MIT actually has a living wage calculator. So if you go to Google and you Google MIT living wage, they've got a calculator for every state, every county, and every state in the country. And there are a number of companies that are really driving toward, and some are getting close to, the minimum living wage for at least a single person. Not probably where it needs to be, but it's a great start. So anyway, so now I'm going to throw that. So what do you think? What do you think about living wage, and how do we get there?
So I believe in it. I absolutely believe in it. I can't imagine leaving after working 8 hours and going to another job. And I call it during COVID, which makes no sense, but you all know what I mean. During COVID, to recognize that when the cases started popping up of COVID in the nursing homes locally, the first question was, how many of our, during COVID, when all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, how many of our staff are working in other buildings? To recognize and we pay well, and we have great staffing, to realize how many people were still working multiple jobs. And then we had to ask them to choose. The exhaustion, the inability to care deeply about thy work if you're running to multiple places, working with different teams. What does that do to your heart? Not heart in a sense of lovey-dovey and my compassion and stuff, but your actual organ, the stress, right, the cortisol, the exhaustion. How long can you how do we not care for our caregivers? Do you know what I mean? How do we not give them that ability to commit deeply to one organization? And I think Robin Stone had a big study about all the livable wage and how to get there and what the outcomes were. And, I'm kind of I use that and share that with the board. But Duncaster has always been in a way of looking at every role and making sure that over a course of the years, we can't do it in 1 year, but over the course of years, this year we did wait staff, the dining room staff in independent living. We had done the CNAs and nurses. And but along with that comes a deep sense of accountability, an uprise in one's self-worth. And so to say, gosh, this is a nursing position. I'm not tolerating that behavior. That takes us down. That devalues the nursing assistants. We want to be the best. And I've got the we're all going to say this, right? Our nurses are the best. And here's the thing. Oh gosh, Steve, now because I can't see anybody else, I feel like I'm really just talking to you. So now I'm really personal.
This is good. This is good.
I walked over to, I was over, I'm a nursing home nurse. I'm Kelly, I pass pills and I went over the other day we just had our state survey, which went beautifully and stressful as heck, but
Of course.
I went over to the nurses station. There were 3 nurses there to thank them. And they said, I'm so excited a nurse is our president.
That is
showing that core. Yeah.
So the one other thing that you've said that I'm not sure I've ever heard a leader say to me in the senior living industry that just I got to think about and write about is this idea that we hold high standards and that we shoot for and strive for high standards, because I think that many operators accept substandard behavior because they think they don't have a choice. And honest to God, who wants to work for an organization that says anything is okay? Right. I think that there's I don't know that anybody's done studies on this. It's something that should be looked at. I know that, as anybody who knows me knows I'm a churchy guy, right? And so I look at church growth, and there's been a lot of work when looking at churches that are having high impact and high growth of membership. And there are always churches that hold high standards that make it actually hard to be a church member and not easy to be a church member. It seems counterintuitive, but I know I want to work for an organization that's excellent. I don't want to work for an organization that's mediocre. Right.
Right. And if I'm a clinician, so here's the other thing. So I had reached out to, I needed nurses. I needed leadership nurses. Right. I reached out to a friend, Kristen, and Adrian, and some of the folks that you met at Leading Age that day. We all sat together in the opening session, and they're the best, right? They just get it, right? We're all works in progress, so nobody's perfect. I'm not saying that, but sure. Their standards are so high, which then makes the other nurses say, right, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm going. Days are hard. Don't get me wrong. I think sometimes we're emotionally sad, but to know that this is where we're going, and this is, and even in hard times, making that decision to say making the vaccine mandatory. And so we made it mandatory in August, and before the state did, before others. And then came the question of how do you offer, what are they called? Exemptions. And what does that look like? And really hearing from our stakeholders that they did not want anybody in clinical to be unvaccinated despite accommodations.
Yeah.
Just the risk is too high.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing for me. It's why I've been such an advocate of mandatory vaccinations since the beginning, because the price is too high to not do it. So absolutely.
We fought over it. It came back to the highest of high standards.
You bet. So listen, we have just kind of completely blown through time. This has been a fantastic conversation. We'll have to do it again. Thank you for all of you who commented. And so offline, I'm going to tell you about this new project I'm working on. And it is really, really cool. With that, actually, why don't you stay on for just a second as I end the broadcast? Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, everybody. And we'll be back next week.